Hello and welcome back to Bad Lit Friends, the writing podcast that barely knows what it's doing. I'm Kirk Rafferty, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Meagan Thompson-Mann, and this is episode 6, if you can believe it.
Episode 6, crazy.
It's
crazy.
amazing that they let us do this. I mean, they don't. We just do it anyway.
They pay us, right?
I
haven't got my check yet.
It must be like one of those George Soros checks, right?
Right, exactly, yes.
So what have you been up to for the past week? What about this vacation that you abandoned us for?
Yeah, so I live in Colorado, and we went up to Winter Park, and we had a nice long weekend. Did a little bit of hiking, went up to the hot springs and soaked there, and just had a really good time. And did not feel guilty at all about abandoning you and Rylan. So I just want to
We
make
hate
that
you.
clear.
It's okay. We did just fine without you.
You did actually.
It was
great.
ladies' night, and the feeling was right.
In fact, we are going to bring Rylan back as another voice on the show, I think. She is on the East Coast right now having fun, so she couldn't make it tonight, but I think next episode we'll start hearing more of her.
Yeah. So we are wild and free this week. It's Kirk and me without a producer.
We can say or do anything,
God.
Meagan.
I know. So when I say to Rylan, like, don't put that in the pod, I don't have anybody around to, not put it in the pod. So I better
Exactly.
I better be a little more careful.
So what have you been up to?
I have continued to edit like a maniac on my first book. I am now down to about 79,000 words. This is the behemoth that
Crazy.
started at 144,000. Now, this is not to say that number will not go back up. I have 2 chapters I want to add. I have some character development to do as well. And what's crazy is that one of the chapters that I'm going to add is actually a reworked version of the first chapter that I axed in its entirety that I talked about the other week. It was the first cut, was the deepest, but it went away. But now it's coming back in because I actually realized that it did a lot of work and did it fairly economically. So I've been doing about a chapter a night after work, which is exhausting. It's taking me about 2.5 hours to do a chapter. That's not bad considering my first edit of the book took me, almost 2 months. I'm kind of blowing through things, and if I don't wrap it all up this weekend in terms of the first pass, it's going to be next week. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. The other thing is that Shane and I finally set a date for our wedding next year, which
Yay, congratulations.
Yeah, we are going to get married on June 10th. My family may actually find out about this from the podcast because our weekly family Zoom is canceled this week while my mom is at a book fair. So
You're in so much trouble.
I am in so much trouble, especially because we're eloping. So we're going to the Bay Area. We're not really sure exactly where yet, but because we're good libs, we're going to get married like either in San Francisco or Berkeley so that we can be, near the mothership and power up. So
Yeah.
None
There
so
you
lib.
go. Well, congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
is amazing.
It only took 14 years to get here. So this week, we are going to get to the topic that we were supposed to get to last week before Kirk forgot that we have a podcast and he's going on vacation, which is actually we've decided to split the topic into at least 2 parts. So I've been calling it Querying for the Terribly Nervous, which is how I felt when I thought that I was ready to start querying. Part 1 has the subtitle of How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Query Letter.
Yeah.
Kirk knows so much about querying, but also so much specifically about drafting a great query letter. Kirk is going to run this to some extent. I've got lots of questions for him.
So for anybody that is just now kind of starting to figure out that they want to be a writer and they're not really sure how to get their book into people's hands, traditional publishing is what we're going to talk about. If you want your book in the hands of a publisher, so you can walk into a Barnes & Noble and see it sitting on a shelf, you go the traditional publishing route. You need an agent. The agent kind of interfaces with the publisher on your behalf. Very few publishers will talk to the author directly. So you've written a book. You can't just send it to Penguin and say, hey, what do you think? You go through this querying process, and it's a gating process, unfortunately. You have a lot of agents in the industry. Some of them are at very big agencies in New York City. Some of them are at boutique agencies that maybe have just themselves running it. All of them have connections within the publishing industry. What you do is you write a book and you reach out to these agents who look like they're a good fit for your book and put together what's called a query package. The query package typically consists of a query letter, which we're going to talk about today. It also includes a synopsis. Sometimes, not all agents will ask for a synopsis. That synopsis is exactly what it sounds like. It's about 3 pages. We'll talk about that in another episode. And then probably sample chapters. Some agents want 1 to 2 sample chapters. Some agents just want like your first page. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. So let's talk about the query letter.
God, query letters. I mean, as somebody who had no idea what I was doing when I was going into a query letter, it was in many ways harder than writing the book, even though the letter was literally about 2 things I know so well. Number 1, my book, and number 2, me. So, why is it that query letters are so hard to draft?
Whenever you ask a writer what their book is about, and you have spent countless hours, you are intimately familiar with your characters, setting, story, everything. You put countless hours into this book. Ask that writer what their book is about, and a lot of times you get a blank stare.
Writers don't know how to use words to talk about their own work.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so that translates then to now I have to sit down and I have to write this letter about my book. It's hard. I queried for 2 years, and my query letter evolved from a very bad query letter to what I think is a pretty good query letter. It obviously landed me an agent, so it did its job.
Basically, a query letter is, and I'm going to oversimplify a document, which is 1 page to begin with, but it is a way of selling your book and yourself to
Mhm, mhm.
an agent. That's the purpose of it. Why are they so hard to write, though?
So other than we have a hard time talking about our books, there's a very specific format to a query letter as well. Now, you mentioned 1 page, so query letters are 1 page. And in fact, the best query letters are less than 1 page. My suggestion is always keep it under about 500 words. And if you can get it under 400 words, even better.
Sorry, my brain hurts just thinking about that.
You don't have a lot of room to write about this, right? Which means that you have to be very hooky in your query letter. And that's one reason that you have to be very kind of succinct. The other one is agents are crazy busy. Agents will get a dozen or more query letters a day. It's a big part of their day. If your query letter comes in and it's 3 pages, like it's immediately gone. They don't have the time to put into it. You might have an amazing book, but a 3-page query letter is not going to work. You also need, like I say, a hook. So here they are, they're getting through their slush pile, they're looking for something that piques their curiosity. You need to really hook. So if you're writing about a school of magic, you better have something really unique in that query letter about a school of magic, because I guarantee this agent has seen School of Magic every other query letter in their slush pile.
So it's really an opportunity to differentiate yourself if you want to think about them as being a little less scary and think of it more as an opportunity. You could think of it as, well, this is the chance to show that I'm not like the other girls.
Exactly.
This is what makes me different. And when you talk about a hook, I mean, it seems to me, this has been my experience, that some genres lend themselves to hooks more than others. So that if you are writing in a market, book club, women's fiction, you are in a character-driven arc. Right? So while things are happening, they may not be happening at a galloping pace. This is the question that I had for myself, and it's something that you helped me with. How do you make something that isn't necessarily fast-paced hooky?
Mhm, mhm.
And the way that I adjusted my brain was, well, these characters are really interesting. So you write about the hooks of these characters. What makes these people the kind of people you want to sit down and read 300 pages about?
Yeah.
It's not that it's easier if you have a plot-driven book. It's just that it's a different skill set, right?
Sure. And I would say that there are good hooks for every genre. So, first of all, the agent that you're querying, hopefully you have researched that agent and you see that they are looking for, let's say, women's fiction. Right off the bat, if you've written women's fiction, you're in that funnel already. Now you've just got to get through the next filter. And that next filter is, what is a good hook for women's fiction?
Fuck if I know.
Yeah. Okay, well, I was gonna say I don't write for women's fiction, so I don't know. This is where it comes to knowing your genre. So you should be well read within your genre. You have to know your genre and you have to know what interests a reader in your genre. And when you know those things that interest your reader, you've got the hook.
Absolutely. When I started out doing the query letter and you saw my first version and you were like, "Yeah, sorry lady. This is boring." The more I thought about the expectations of readers in the genres that I'm writing in,
Mhm.
it became a little bit more straightforward. And I really encourage people to, and you can tell me I'm wrong since you know a lot more about this, look at how other people who write in your genre have written their own query letters. There are
Yes.
plenty of examples
Yes.
online. Some genres you're gonna find lots in because that's just how it is. You're gonna find more examples in romantasy, straightforward fantasy, some science fiction stuff, some women's fiction stuff. You will
Mhm.
probably not find that many literary fiction, ask me how I know, but you can do a query letter that is hooky for a slow-paced literary fiction novel. It is doable. These examples exist.
Another place that exists that for some reason a lot of people don't know about, even though most people querying novels know about Query Tracker, they don't know that there's author interviews. And those author interviews include a section like, can you paste in your query letter that got you an agent? Some authors don't put their query letter in, but a lot of them do. That's a really good
Did not
resource.
know
We'll
that.
talk about Query Tracker too, because that's a really good resource, not just submitting your queries, but doing research and collecting stats. Because as querying writers, man, that we love to dig into the numbers in between refreshing our email, right? To
Yeah.
see who's responded to us.
While it can be very satisfying to see a bad query letter and pat yourself on the back like, "Well, at least I'm not that bad," it's more useful to see good ones that are not just good to read, but that you also know are successful and landed the agent.
Even a successful query letter that is outside of your genre is still going to work. All query letters follow a pretty specific standard, and we can talk about that. So, if you pull up a romance query letter, you can read through it and you can get an idea of how it's structured and maybe even get some ideas, even though it's outside your genre, maybe get some ideas of, what this particular writer did to more personalize their query letter. But it really does follow a pretty standard format, so many of them are helpful.
Can we talk about voiciness in query letters? Because it's something that I've seen kind of conflicting things about. Personally, I think that if you do have the voice of your novel in your letter, it becomes more engaging, becomes another tool to sell your book. But
Mhm,
I know that some
mhm.
people are just like, no, you just want something that's hooky.
So let's talk about some absolutes first. Your query letter needs to be in third person. Even if you wrote your novel in first person, even if you feel like, well, I could make my query letter really unique and quirky by writing it in first person, don't do that. It needs to be in third person. So that's the first of all. Second of all, this is a professional letter that you're writing. It's a professional letter for a professional relationship with an agent. So you need to keep that in mind. We'll set that aside now and talk about like voiciness. And yes, I do believe that, let's say if you wrote a rom-com, right? And your characters are kind of witty and charming, make your query letter a little bit witty and charming. Don't go crazy. Don't fall into character. Don't, for God's sakes, don't write as one of your characters. You are always writing as the author. But you can kind of play with your words a little bit. You can toy around. So yes, you can be voicey. You don't have to be. I would say, try to inject at least a little bit of your personality into the query letter. You don't want to make it dry, especially in that first critical paragraph that you are trying to hook the agent into stopping at your query letter before they move on to the next query letter.
It's interesting having done this now, how much I believe that I've matched the voice of the book. My first book is written in first person past. How much I think that I matched that voice while being in third person
Uh-huh.
so that when they do read the opening chapter or 50 pages or whatever it is that they ask for, they're not surprised. If they're not going to get the tone in the first page or two, you might even miss an opportunity for that agent to say, you know what, this isn't for me, but come back to me with something else that you have. I've had that happen to me multiple times now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely like another don't. There are so many don'ts, right?
Yeah.
You're selling this book. If you envision your book as a trilogy or a duology or more than one book, you need to make sure that this book
Mhm.
stands on its own. If you put something in there like this is the first book in a three-book trilogy, you're liable to cut yourself off at the knees. No publisher is going to sign a new author for a trilogy. Now, they might sign you for a three-book deal if they're blown away by your first book, but you are querying one book for this agent, and that one book needs to stand on its own. And if you never sell another book, the reader should have a nice ending for that one book.
So, for example, my work in progress right now, book 2, actually, I've kind of thought about it as the first in a planned 3-book series, but
Mhm.
the way that I phrased it in the synopsis that I had to do was, it's the first in a planned 3-book series exploring power, complicity, and the bargains women make in pursuit of love and ambition, set against a backdrop of the Great Recession, while the series follows the consequences of the main character's choices as they parallel her studies. The book stands alone as a complete and thematically resolved narrative.
There you go. Yep. That's a fancy smancy way of saying, this book stands on its own. Yeah, absolutely.
You just got to get one agent interested in one book,
Sure.
right? That's where you
Yeah.
start. That's the first step. After that, go on and conquer the world. So, we've talked a lot about, what a query letter is for. If we want to talk about what does it consist of, how does it flow, how do agents expect it to look?
So earlier I said they're very structured. And yes, you can play with the structure a little bit, but there is a particular structure. That starts with the greeting. Dear first name. Unless you are querying some ancient agent that absolutely insists on Mr. whatever and has that in their querying instructions, it's always dear first name. After the greeting, we get into what I call personalization. If you've been listening to the show, you know that I don't care for personalization. I don't think it's necessary unless you were invited to query, like at a conference. You went to a conference, at a one-on-one with an agent or hallway discussion with an agent, and they said, yes, query me. Yeah, put the personalization in that you met them at the conference. There's no reason to say, I noticed that you are looking for science fiction. Well, I just happen to write a science fiction novel. That's terrible personalization. Likewise, you don't want your personalization to be stalkerish. I notice you live 2 miles from my house. Like, just don't be a stalker.
Or, hey, boo, I love your highlights. Looking
Please don't
good.
do that. You are going to put in your title, your genre, your audience, and audience is like adult, young adult, children's, whatever, and comps. So that's all kind of the metadata that you're going to roll into your query letter. And so sometimes people will put all of that metadata, my book, The Dark Shadows, is complete at 95,000 words, is young adult, whatever. You can either put all of that in the beginning or you can drop it down to the end. So I've seen some really good query letters that are like, Dear Amy, and then it just jumps right into 17-year-old Brandon has this thing. And what that does is immediately builds a hook. And I'm sorry, I'm terrible at just coming up with a hook off the top of my head, but they jump right into it. And that's fine. You can do that. That's a really good
Mhm.
strategy. You can also just say, I'm writing to query you with my 95,000 word science fiction novel, The Big Planet. That I told you I'm terrible at this, right? You're going to build in that hook and then you're going to kind of summarize your book. The big thing about this is don't give spoilers away. What you're looking to do is hook your agent. So you don't want to spoil your book. You want to tease your book. The whole idea behind a query letter is to get the agent to request your manuscript. So everything that you can do for that goal, you do it. And that means no spoilers, because if you spoil it, then they're like, yeah, that seems like a bland ending to me or whatever.
That's what your synopsis is for.
Or yeah, to bore and disappoint the agent, yes.
So I've seen that you want to have about half to two-thirds of your book in those summary paragraphs, that you should
Mhm.
have enough of the story that it's something that the agent wants to, as you said, see the end of. But it's more than a striptease.
The first agents that I queried were like my so-called dream agents, right? I was like, "She's perfect. He's absolutely perfect." You get one shot with this book at an
Yeah.
agent, right? So
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad I have no dream agent. My dream agent is the agent who will represent me. I just need to click with this person and they need to click with me and my book, and
mhm.
that's all I care about. But the only necessary one is the one that will get you through the door. If you're doing trad pub, get you through the door of one of the big 5 or one of their imprints, and that's it.
Yeah. Let me jump into the 5 questions that your query letter should
Yeah.
answer. The first one is your main character. So you should introduce your main character, and that's usually, 17-year-old Bob, wants to destroy Australia. We now have our main character. So that's the first question. The second one is, what do they want? And when I say what do they want, a lot of times that what they want isn't what the character sees as success. And we don't have to jump into a whole kind of how to write characters or whatever here. But I'm just saying like internally, what does this character truly want? So like, let's take a movie like the original Star Wars, right? Luke Skywalker, what does he really want? He wants a life of adventure, right? He wants to get off this cruddy planet. What he doesn't want is, like a couple new droids, even though that's what he's doing kind of at the beginning of the movie. The next thing then is, what is standing in the way? That might be your protagonist. That might be their situation. Maybe your main character lives in poverty. Their main want is they want to get themselves and their family out of poverty. What's standing in the way? It could be all kinds of things. It could be the system, right? Now, if it's the system, you might want to hone in a little more on that. You might want to have a protagonist who represents that system. That's what's standing in the way. You want to answer then, what is the character willing to do to get it? This is where you've hooked your agent into wanting to read more, and now you're really pulling them in to see what's going to happen in the story. So what they're willing to do to get it. They start off on a journey. Maybe they rob a bank or something, right? So something that's just going to start intriguing the agent. And then the last question you want to answer is, what are the stakes? What happens if they fail? If your query letter doesn't have stakes, like, you have wasted everybody's time. There has to be stakes. And so that's the final question that your query needs to answer.
The genre that I write in doesn't I didn't naturally think of it as having stakes. There are stakes. I just had
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think about the book in a more holistic way. Stakes don't have to be life or death. They can be the slow death of the soul, right? So almost every book is going to have stakes.
And you need to think about your stakes. If you tell me that your stakes are, if Jason doesn't get what he wants, he loses everything. Don't tell me he loses everything. It tells the agent nothing. You need to hone in on this. What does it mean? If Joe can't pull his family out of poverty, their landlord forecloses on them and kicks them out on the street, or whatever the consequences are of failure is what needs to be in your query letter. So all of those elements have to be in your query letter. If you miss even one of them, you're really hobbling yourself.
And again, you're not so special, right? You may think that, oh, my book is so amazing and I don't need to conform to this. Get over yourself. I'm not saying that to be mean or to be gatekeepy here. It's just the reality. And if you aren't comfortable with this, that's fine. This is not a value judgment. It's just that if you want to be in this trad pub universe, you have to conform to the rules that they've set up.
TradPub is full of gatekeeping. TradPub is full of bars you must hurdle, of walls that you must walk within. It may be that TradPub just isn't right for you, may not be right for your book, and that's fine. There are other options to get your book into people's hands. So we're talking about TradPub here, and with TradPub, there's just rules to the game. We've already talked about some of the do's and don'ts of querying. I made a little list here. I might repeat myself on this. Some of the do's, like, stay on point, stay very focused on your book and your plot. Don't wander. Stay under that 500 word limit. And man, if you can knock it out in 350 to 400 words, that's even better. So again, these agents are so overworked. They get so many query letters. When yours comes in as a short query letter, they're automatically going to be happy to see your query letter. And that starts you off on a good foot. Know your genre and word counts. We talked about word counts in the last one or the previous one. You need to know your word counts, and man, you got to stick with your word counts. If you query a 125,000 young adult novel, like,
It's auto reject. You're
yeah.
not gonna get past that.
Likewise, if you query with a 55,000 word science fiction novel, like, you're also not getting in.
Yeah.
I think 55K falls into novella. If
Mhm.
you're pitching it as a novella, maybe. If the agent is looking for novellas, maybe. But I will tell you, the market is not great for novellas
Yeah.
right now. So another do I have written down is like mention your protagonist by name as soon as possible. Once you actually start pitching, that should be in the first 1 to 2 sentences.
Yeah.
It really should be in the first sentence. Follow the agent's querying instructions to the
Yes.
letter. Some agents are very specific about what they want. Some agents will say, don't send me your first chapters. All I want is your query letter. If you send them the first chapters thinking, yeah, but I'm a snowflake, you're liable to piss them off, right? So whatever they say goes. Gosh, I even had there was an agent, and they were at a really big agency. They didn't even want a query letter. They had a form. It was outside Query Tracker, and it was just like title, your name, word count, genre, and then a text box like, give me 2 paragraphs about your novel. That's all they wanted, right? So they didn't even want a query letter. So stick to the instructions. And by the way, if your agent is using Query Tracker and they're not accepting queries by email, don't go searching for their email and then try to run around that, because that's not only instant rejection, but you're just making life shitty on this agent
Yeah.
who has a specific workflow, and you are violating that.
It's a modicum of respect. As I was saying before, why do you wanna close doors?
There's a agent on Blue Sky who posted some weeks ago. She said at least once a week, somebody pitches her a children's book. And she said she doesn't know how to make it any clearer. She doesn't rep children's books. And they find any way they can to pitch her these children's books. And she's like, I don't even look at your query. Like, I don't know why you keep sending me this. So don't make life hard on agents.
You never know if they're going to change genres, and maybe they will be repping children's books in the future, and then, oh, it's that person who couldn't read. So, you don't know if in the future, these are people who are going to be repping children's books, for example, and then you've closed a door.
Yeah. However long it took you to query that wrong agent, you've just wasted your time. You've just wasted their time. And maybe you don't care, but you've wasted your time. You could have spent that time researching another agent. So
Mhm,
don't do it.
mhm.
Another do that I have is getting somebody to look at your query letter. Just like you have beta readers for your books, you should also have some eyeballs on your query letter. I queried with a query letter. I don't know how long. There was a typo in my first paragraph. Months.
God,
Little red squiggly line under it in Word right there
fantastic.
and never saw it. And that was on me for not having somebody look at my query letter.
Going through and, reworking my book right now, I cannot believe how many errors I have found in it, even though I went through that thing so carefully. I mean, like, typos,
Yeah.
and I go, "How did I miss it? How
Mhm,
could"
mhm.
it's so easy when you are so close to your work, you just it's like becoming snowblind, right? You just don't see it anymore.
I've never yet heard of an agent rejecting a
Yeah.
query letter because of a typo.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point is, like I've said several times, this is a professional letter, right? You want to put your best foot forward. You might get a chuckle out of the agent or whatever, but they're not going to reject you based on that typo. However, get eyes on your query letter. Maybe you've got a sentence that reads awkwardly and somebody else can point it out and say, if you just transpose these 2 words or whatever. So yeah. My next don't query more than one agent at an agency at a time, unless they say on their website that you can do that. Let's say the agent you're querying is at Acme Agency. Don't query another person at Acme Agency until you get a rejection back or maybe an acceptance back.
And there's a corollary to that, where some agencies will say, if it's a no from one, it's a no from all.
Mhm, mhm.
And so you need to note that because, as you said, that's not necessarily the case everywhere, that you're doing the one at a time, but
Mhm.
you can approach somebody else. But if they clearly say a no from one is a no from all, respect it, don't be a jerk.
Yeah, yeah. That was a tough one for me because I built a spreadsheet, right? Like of all the agents that I'm going to query, and I would query in batches. And I had already been rejected at one particular agency, but this other agent was perfect, right? Like they wanted exactly what I was selling, but it's a no from one is a no from all agency, right? It killed me. It broke my soul, but you have to respect it.
Those are the breaks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to say, don't make promises. Don't say that this will be an unforgettable reading experience or they will be blown away by the twists and turns that your story takes.
It's a rollicking good time. Maybe not for that reader, though.
Yeah, just again, it's a professional letter. Don't overhype yourself. You actually get a paragraph where you can talk about yourself. There's a bio paragraph. Don't make that paragraph too long. You can talk about yourself there. But if you say something like, this is the best action adventure book you will ever read, the agent is going to say, no, it's not, and move on to the next one. And the reason is they've seen it all. They've seen this, and you will just be the next casualty of their deleted box. Don't discuss themes or what inspired you to write the book. And even if your inspiration was really unique and interesting and things like that, you are selling your book. You're not selling your inspiration. You are pitching the book, and you are only pitching the book.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, when you're in your little bio portion, you can say something like the protagonist, I lived in Kuala Lumpur in the 90s. That's more interesting. It also says, why is this the person who needs to be writing this book? Right.
Yeah,
And I think as well, for some books that may be representing marginalized communities, that's a really important thing to say. But
absolutely.
it's the thing that links you to the book. It is the thing that, oh, I remember that person. That's the person who lived in Kuala Lumpur in the 90s. It's the hook about you.
So you've mentioned some, like, when it's appropriate to this. I will mention some exceptions to this. Some agents put in their query tracker form what makes you the person to write this
Yeah, that's
story.
true. That's true.
Knock it out of the park with
Yeah.
that. The other time probably is going to be when you actually get, in finger quotes, the call
Mm-hmm.
with an agent. They're probably going to ask you, like, what inspired you to write the book? Then, bury your soul. It doesn't belong in a query letter, not because there's anything wrong with being inspired. It just doesn't belong there. Your agent wants to know about the book. You're
Mm-hmm.
selling the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last one that I'll just point out is don't include quotes and praise like, my mom loved this book. Or even, you know what, if you've got a published author friend, Stephen King, my neighbor, says this is a fantastic manuscript. Okay, maybe you could put that in, right? If it's true, you better not be lying. And you better be writing from Maine.
Yeah, yeah. The other exception I think that you might want to put in here is that I had it in for a while, which was that recently an editor at a Big Five house had expressed interest in my book. It was appropriate to put it there. That's been a year now, so I'm not putting it in my query letter anymore.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was true and it was appropriate to put in there because it showed to an agent, okay, there's somebody that she's pitched this to that it had some interest in. Anything that you can do that it's still in this particular realm of publishing, right? But not, my English teacher in ninth grade said that
Or
I was
even
going to be
my
the
beta
best.
readers.
Or even my
Yeah.
beta readers.
Yeah.
That's a hard one because I'm like, you know what? My beta readers think I'm great. Well,
Yeah.
they do think I'm great, but who cares? Who are they? Who are these people? Why should anybody care about them?
I have to tell you, I just got the most amazing feedback from a beta reader. She had taken the unique step, or unique for me anyway. So she had my manuscript in Microsoft Word format, and she was just writing her reactions down in real time in the side notes. It was just, I was dying. And so she would say, oh my God, is this foreshadowing? Is this character going to die? And I'm like, yes, but you don't know it yet.
It is pleasure with my work in progress, my critique partners and my alphas. When they ask me the questions, like that, like, "Is this going to happen?" And I've misdirected them a little bit. It makes me so happy. Or they
Yeah.
say things like, "Why do I hate him, but I love him?" I'm like, "Yes, yes! You should feel conflicted and dirty about yourself. That's how I want you to feel. Pull the strings," you know? It's very pleasurable. We've talked about, like, what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there. We should provide links to some good examples in the show notes so that people get an idea of it.
I'll show my query letter. People can judge for themselves, though, if, like,
True.
this is a good query letter or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It was an adequate query letter, right?
Great point. It does not need to win the Nobel Prize. It only needs to be adequate. This is something that I learned when I was studying for the bar.
I don't have hard date on this, but I suspect that your hook carries about 90% of the weight of your query letter. If you strive for perfection anywhere in your query letter, strive for it in the hook. In fact, I will share my hook. This is the hook that landed me an agent. It got me 2 agent offers and landed me, with my current agent. So I started out with, "I'm thrilled to present to you my novel, blah, 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 90,000 words, blah, blah, blah." So this was an adult historical. Soviet cosmonaut Victoria Rusanova crash lands in Cold War America and must escape her pursuers before they capture her and the secrets she carries.
That's great.
That's my hook. I kinda think it's a good hook, right? I think it's a unique hook. We learn a lot about the main character right off the bat in just one sentence, you know?
Mhm.
Obviously, we know it's gonna be a fish out of water type story, right? It's a female cosmonaut in Cold War America, height of the Cold War.
And we know what kind of danger she's in. What does she want? In one sentence, right? It's very economical.
I will post a link to this query letter, and you can form your own opinion of it.
So, one of the things that I think a lot of people feel about querying is that it doesn't take into account the emotional side of querying because your book is your baby. It's the product of endless hours, days, weeks, years of
Yeah.
putting yourself onto the page and working with it, rewriting it, fine-tuning it, showing it to other people for their feedback. You're already feeling vulnerable. And
Mhm.
this is a numbers game, and most of those numbers are 0. Hearing rejection after rejection can wound not only your ego, but also your heart. And the form rejections in particular can hurt so much. It's one thing to get a brilliant personalized rejection. I've had plenty of those. It's the ones which are just like, "Sorry, not sorry, bye.
To whom it may concern.
Sorry that you suck. Please don't come back." And they did hurt. The first form rejection I got hurt. But now, honestly, the form rejections, I just laugh. It's just like,
Yeah.
I know that they read my stuff, and that's great. That's fine. I wasn't right. And I know that they've got a job to do, and I respect that they're doing what they need to do. But at the same time, I'm like, I know this is your form rejection because I have a query tracker account and I can see this is the same one you sent to everyone. And that's fine. I don't mind them anymore. I don't even care. But when you start out, it can feel like, needle after needle after needle.
Sure. There's also a component of as soon as you send that very first query letter, you are now glued at the hip to your email account for the next however long you are querying. I remember almost not even wanting to be away from my desk in case I missed that ding that was the one. It gets easier as you go along because you sort of get numb to it after a while.
I am also an exception to this because I set it and forget it. And like, honestly, I had forgotten the person who rejected me last week and got the rejection after 120 days. And I had totally forgotten that I had
You're
queried her in the first
rejecting
place.
me. I'm rejecting you. I don't
Yeah,
even know you.
who are you?
Who are you? How'd you get my email?
I was with Kirk when he hadn't gotten his agent yet, and he was worried about this stuff and so plugged into it, and I was like, "Wow, that seems stressful. Do I really wanna do this?"
Yeah, yeah. My advice for querying that really kind of steeled me. It resolved me to kind of going through this pain because it is a pain. And that is, I just made a decision that I was either going to query until I ran out of agents or I ran out of steam.
Mhm.
And I don't think I ever ran out of steam. I had some times where I was like, yeah, this is just not going to happen, at least with this book. Right. But I just kinda made a promise to myself that until I run out of agents or I run out of steam, we're just gonna keep doing this thing.
That's a good promise to make to yourself. What do I know? I don't have an agent. Yet.
Yet.
Yet. It is important to remember that rejection isn't failure. It's just, "You're not right for me." You get one person who says to you, "This is a great book and it's not for me." It takes, at least in my experience, it takes some of the pressure off of you. You are just trying to sell a book to somebody who is trying to sell a book to another person who is trying to sell a book to a reader, right?
Mhm, mhm.
You are the beginning of this chain. And although you are the most important person, I would like to think, because you're creating the product, you are still just a link in a chain from
Mhm.
writer to reader.
And I'll tell you, if you think querying is hard, it's hard all the way down, right? It's turtles all the way down. Because once you land an agent and your book is ready to go on submission, I have a spreadsheet of editors that have rejected my book. So it doesn't go away. And then once you finally find an editor that wants your book, now you have to go through the whole editorial process. That editor actually has to convince their boss, their coworkers, that this book that they are now championing is good. So you're constantly going through these gates
Mhm.
every step of the way. That once you get your agent, it's far from over. That's something you need to steel yourself for as well. Granted, it's the biggest step. You can't do the other steps without getting that first step right. So, not to turn it into something minor, but you are constantly querying.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, as we mentioned before, is only part one of this discussion. And it is painful. And it's good to talk about painful things because it makes you understand that you are not alone. Writing can be such a solitary discipline. And we've talked so many times about finding people to have around you as support, but even just knowing that there are so many other people who are trying to do what you're doing, instead of thinking about them as competition, thinking about them as your support network. We're your support
Yeah.
network.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
we're here too. You're not alone in your brilliance and you're not alone in your suckage. We're all there with you. But we're going to talk about synopses next week, which is a topic that I really do want to talk about because I've done one. I hate it.
Yeah.
Let's talk some hot goss.
Perfect.
This week, we're going to talk about the law, about the Anthropic lawsuit, which actually settled today, September 5th. It's an interesting story. Kirk and I have talked about it occasionally. So, Anthropic is an AI company. Its LLM is Claude. It's one of the major ones, not, ChatGPT, obviously. The conflict here was that Anthropic trained its chatbot, Claude, on published materials. Those authors, when they found out that their works had been used without their express permission to train these chatbots, understandably got a little upset. I mean, I would be too.
Well, and it's interesting, they were able to take these copyrighted materials without paying for them because they scraped piracy sites. So these scourges that are out there that take the works of hardworking writers and put them up for free, Anthropic went out and scraped those sites. And so that's how they got those works.
Not all of them, and that's where we come to some of the rulings that have happened in this case. So, in June of this year, the judge in this case, this is a federal case, ruled that Anthropic's use of books that it had paid for and then used to train Claude, that was fair use.
Which is bullshit, but that's not a legal term,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. I mean, it's not a legal term, but morality and legality
Right.
do not necessarily overlap. If they do, then you might be happy. Actually, you might be happy if they don't overlap. It depends on what your case is like. But they're not always overlapping or even overlapping that much. But basically, the judge said, the quote was something like, if you're going to make someone pay specifically for the use of a book every time they use it, that's unthinkable. Right.
Mhm.
But to me, not as a lawyer, but as a layperson, I'm like, but I'm just a person. How many times am I going to read a book? Claude is going to read this book millions and millions and millions of times. How is that
Right.
fair? But the judge also said at the same time that Anthropic's use and even its possession of it was something like 7 million books that it gathered from pirate sites.
Using them is fair use, but storing them was not fair use.
I believe that you're right. It was the possession and storage wasn't fair use. So it was these issues relating to piracy that were going to go forward towards trial. We're talking not just about like millions of dollars or billions of dollars. The number $1 trillion, like, like,
Yeah.
wow, that was being thrown around.
Mhm.
Terrifying. That is a killer. So Anthropic said that this was fair use, that the training on these legally acquired books where it was fair use, they're transforming the material, right? They're not
Mhm.
reproducing it exactly as it is on the page. It's not being reproduced verbatim, right? So if you think about transformative works, we right now are going through a
Mhm.
period of time when there are tons of books that started out as fanfic and now are their own books.
Yeah.
50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fanfic. Really, really very strange. It's a transformative work because it's taking some of the same themes, not the same thing at all.
It's also changing the character names and
Absolutely.
anything that would actually be labeled as that author's,
Yeah.
like, intellectual
Yeah.
property, right? Yeah.
But personally, I think that what Claude and what ChatGPT and some of the other ones are doing is a little bit more than that. The authors were saying what you're doing is it's copyright infringement on a huge scale, so big that it's stealing in order to power its LLM.
Mhm.
So the judge says, okay, if you bought it and you transformed it, this is just like the person who's writing 50 Shades of Grey. But the books that were acquired through piracy, that's infringement. That's
Yeah.
not protected speech,
Yeah.
right? They're moving towards, after that ruling in June, they continue to move towards trial. The trial was set for December of this year. This $1 trillion figure is getting thrown around, and there's tons of discovery going on. There's document production, there's interrogatories, there's depositions. As a lawyer, I will tell you, if you are in discovery hell, you are in a bad, bad place. It is miserable for everyone involved, and you don't want to be there. As a result, Anthropic decides to settle the case, and they settle the case today for $1.5 billion and some other terms as well, which are kind of interesting. What it works out to is there were 500,000 authors that they have said are in this class, and it works out to gross $3,000 per author. That's gross. I've seen the figure of $2,000 being put out there as what an author who is within this class of 500,000 might expect to receive. I actually think that's pretty generous.
So on paper, you've been awarded $3,000,
Yeah.
but after legal fees and everything like that, you might get top end $2,000,
Top end.
probably less.
Probably less. What I did think was really interesting was that, and I don't think that I've ever seen this before, is that Anthropic also agreed that 500,000 authors was not a cap. So that if authors came forward after this, and there's probably some time cap on this, but I'm not aware of it, but came forward and said, you know what? I wasn't aware of this until after the settlement, until after the 500,000 authors, but my work is in there. I can prove it. They're saying, okay, we'll pay you that $3,000 too. So that 1.5 billion, that's a
Could get higher.
Oh, it will get higher. I promise you that number is going to get higher. I have seen astronomical number of writers potentially who could have been in this class. So it's going to be more. This is huge. This is the first big one. There are other similar cases kind of making their way through the court system. I have not looked too closely at those. I know there's one against ChatGPT. I know that there have been some different rulings, and that's kind of what you get when you're in the court system. If you're in different circuits, for example, if we're going up to the appeals court, this one won't. They've settled this case. This is over. I'm sure that Anthropic is delighted to be walking away from this with potentially only $1.5 billion in liability.
Sure, that's a
Yeah.
slap on the wrist.
We don't know what's gonna happen with ChatGPT. We don't know what's gonna happen with any of the other ones. If these get to trial and you get different results in different circuits, you're getting into conflict. This isn't over. It's over for Anthropic for now.
Mhm.
But this question of how are these LLMs training their products? Well, they're training them on humans. Why is it that they sound like they're humans? Because they're trained on us. Another topic I did think about talking about this week was Rebecca Huang's Catabasis, which came out this week, which I've not read. And people were saying, oh, it's got to be AI because it's got these things in it that remind me.
Yeah.
She's an amazing, incredibly well educated, and beautifully writing author. If it feels weird and a little elevated, and we think about LLMs as occasionally being a little too fancy for their own goods, well, it's because they've been trained on
Yeah.
authors like her,
Yeah.
right? So there are actual human beings that are being harmed by these
Oh,
LLMs.
absolutely. And we talked about that.
We
We
have. It's gonna be something we keep coming back to again and again and again because they're just gonna keep stealing. I mean, that's the reality of it. If they can get away with it, they're gonna keep doing it. Where do these AIs come from? Where do these companies come from? Where are they born? They're born in Silicon Valley. And it's the break
Yeah.
things and ask for forgiveness later. That's the way that they operate, and they're just gonna keep doing it.
My whole objection, again, moral objection, because I guess legally they determine fair use, but my whole objection to fair use is, let's say that me as a writer, I read Frank Herbert's Dune, and I am inspired to write my own book about a desert planet. And so I write this book and I'm very inspired by Frank Herbert. The AI proponents are saying there's no difference. Claude learned from this book, just like you learned from this book. The thing is, I can't cram the entirety of Dune into my head and be able to recite it word for word. And it even gets worse because if you were to say that Claude is fair use, like not only would that be comparable to me being able to store the entirety of Dune in my head, but to store the entirety of hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
other books.
Yeah.
That's the comparison.
Yeah.
Humans can't do that. When we're inspired in a very general sense. When Claude is inspired because it's got a massive database of things that it learned from, that it's
Yeah.
been trained on. I even hesitate to use the term learned, but I'll use the lingo. So I absolutely am astonished that this can be considered fair use.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems is that, the law, for the most part, it's reactive. It's rarely proactive. And so, you have 18th, 19th, 20th century tools that you're using to deal with very 21st century problems.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
where the law needs to catch up. That requires a Congress that wants to do something about it. I'm just speaking about this through an American lens. We are in a situation, without getting too much into the politics of things, where either they don't care or they're actively promoting this kind of theft, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So if you only have collaborators or people who are completely disinterested, at least on the federal level, there's not going to be anything that's going to happen.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in California, that where I live, which everybody always thinks as, libtastic, there are so many vested interests in this state to prevent anything like that happening at a
Sure.
state level.
There's a lot of tech bro money.
There's a lot of tech bro money, and a lot of the states that we would think, "Oh, well, maybe they'll care." No, there's a lot of tech bro money in
Mhm, mhm,
Massachusetts, in New York,
mhm.
in Connecticut, where I'm from, in Virginia, these places where you think, "Well, maybe I'll have somebody who's sympathetic." No, it's money. Again, capitalism.
To just kinda circle back around, like, the publishing industry, they've said a few kind words to kinda try to keep authors in line, but you know what? They're really excited about
Yeah.
AI. They imagine pumping out book after book after book that no author could ever be that
Mhm.
prolific. They see only dollar signs. They don't consider the fact that these books that would be being pumped out would be lifeless. And nobody wants to fucking read these books. Even if you could convince me that an AI can publish a cool summer read, I don't want to read something generated by a machine. I want to read something that came out of a human brain. Humans want to connect, right? I want to connect with authors that write cool stuff. It is not completely about the story. The author and having that connection to them also matters. And AI
Yeah.
just is not going to do that.
It isn't, and, there have been all of these studies recently saying that essentially and this is boiling things down, AI is actively making people stupider because for whatever reason, people read these AI summaries and don't retain them.
Mhm,
It's not like
mhm.
reading a book, right? And it's not just like, "Oh, well, maybe because I didn't write it, it's not sticking in my brain." There have been studies that say, people are retaining human-generated text more easily than AI. What is it? Maybe it's the uncanny valley effect? I don't know. Personally, this is me, my hot take about all of it. It's that what is expressed is so generic but has the gloss of something deeper that you don't connect.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
the humanity of it, there's only a simulacrum, and we can
yeah.
tell, and our brain is shutting off and going, "Mm-mm, no, no." So even if, like, consciously we're like, "This is very interesting. Oh, this summarizes it very well." Your unconscious, your subconscious is going, "Mm-mm, yucky, no, no."
I shared an Instagram post with you today
Yes.
that, had obviously been written by AI. When we both read it, I was like, "I don't know what I'm supposed to get from
Yeah,
this."
I know.
It's very poetic, it's very flowery. It feels like it should have meaning, right? It felt like there is a deep message here, and I could not see it. And I was being snarky about it when I was like, "What the fuck is
Yeah,
this?"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's really the core problem with AI is that it is on the surface level, it seems to contain meaning, and then when you really dig down into it, it's ugh.
There's something yucky about it in the way that when something doesn't feel right, when we have a feeling of the uncanny, there is that thing, that kind of gag reflex that gets triggered. Anthropic, which is not even one of the big guys out there, like ChatGPT, they have enough fuck you money where $1.5 billion as a floor.
And I fully expect that was the plan all along. Yeah, we'll go ahead and collect this trove of pirated books, knowing full well that we probably will be caught. If we're not, great, but let's plan on getting caught because the business plan will absorb it. And this is what's so gross about it is that it's built in to the
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
Yeah,
The enshittification of everything, right? It's
right.
just really is everything is set up to fail and not fail in your favor.
To bring it full circle.
To bring it full circle, I've been radicalizing myself through this podcast, but this is the beginning. This is the first one. There will be more and there will be larger settlements than this one.
Yeah.
They got off easy.
I wish that I could tell every author who will be a part of that settlement, hey, don't settle. Get your own lawyer because $3,000 is a pittance. I wish I could say that, but even if it was me, it's not me because I don't have a book out there, but if it was me, I would have to take that settlement because I can't
Yeah,
afford a
that's the
lawyer. I
reality.
can't afford that whole thing, right? Just to maybe even fail. And they also counted on that. Stephen King will do his own thing.
Right? You don't need to be part of it. You can bring your own lawsuit, but you gotta have the money, and
Yeah.
for these
Yeah.
ones, they are contingent for the most part, so it's coming out of the settlement. You're not paying for anything upfront. That's the great thing about class actions for the little guy, is that I mean, I got $16 back for, this eyelash enhancer serum that made my eyelashes fall out. That was fun. But if you have the money, the big old fuck you money, and you're willing to take a gamble, especially if you part of the anthropic universe, why not?
Yeah.
Why not go for it? You're going to end up with more than $3,000. That's probably what you're paying your lawyers per hour. But, it is the beginning. There will be more. And these models are just going to keep on doing it, and they're going to find new ways to do more things that we find morally objectionable that could be still legally right. This is my big call out to people. Write letters to your state representatives. This is going to start in the states. Nothing's going to happen in the federal level for the foreseeable future. Write to your state senators, to your representatives, to your governor. If this is something that you feel strongly about, that these models should not be trained on humans like this, right? You might actually have someone who will listen to you. You might be in a state that's not fully hijacked. I'm not in one of those states. So, do it for me. This has been an interesting introduction to querying, and we are going to have a part 2 for more querying for the Terribly Nervous, part 2 about synopses. Thanks again for listening to our very strange little baby here. You can find us on the social medias. We are Bad Lit Friends everywhere. We're on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads. My feelings about Threads are reserved for another time. We also have a website, badlitfriends.com, and you can find us on every major podcast platform. We recently found out that our YouTube channel did not have episodes 4 and 5 because YouTube had made them private, but now they are public. Please listen to us, and please like, subscribe, review us. We want more amazing reviews, whether or not we deserve them. Tell people about our podcast, even people who aren't writers. We don't care.
Yeah, and follow us on the socials because we follow back because we're nice.
We are nice people. I did follow back some more people today. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Bad Lit Friends, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.